Welcome back to All Things Creepy. I'm your host, Micah James, and this week we are covering the music urban legends slash mysteries iceberg from Reddit user Royale Tenenbaum. They posted this in the iceberg charts subreddit 4 years ago. Now, part of the reason why I mentioned that is because some of these legends and mysteries have since been debunked or solved, and I will be mentioning as such when we approach those items. I also want to mention that, as usual, this chart will be posted in the show notes. I mean, the main reason is so you guys get the sauce, the original source, and, I can, give, proper credit to Royale Tenenbaum. But, a secondary reason is because I'm not covering every single item that they put into this chart. It's for various reasons. For example, some of these could warrant their own episode, like Tupac and Biggie's murders, or they were a little too weird, like Led Zeppelin's Mud Shark incident. And in some cases, I couldn't find enough information to even include it in this episode. So in case you wanted to look into some of these other items that I didn't cover, you are able to look at this chart and look into some of the ones, like I said, that I'm not going to be covering. Now we have 7 tiers to get through, so let's dive in. So tier 1, this is stuff that you probably have heard of. This is the most well-known stuff. And we're starting off with backmasking. Now, not everyone probably has heard this specific term before, but you've probably heard this recording technique in various songs, as a lot of bands and performers do utilize this technique. It's when a message is recorded backwards in the track that's meant to play forward. Like I said, there are a lot of performers who utilize this technique. As I was researching this specific item, Weird Al's Nature Trail to Hell came on. So what a better example than to use the song I was listening to than Nature Trail to Hell. Now, if you reverse a certain lyric, you are able to hear Satan eats Cheese Whiz. Now, not all messages are this silly or out there, but it'll be something like this where it's like when you play it forward, it might be something unexpected. The next one is Elvis faked his death. Now, there are a lot of theories surrounding Elvis and his death, but this one specifically says that on the day he allegedly died, he really didn't. He wanted to escape the public eye. There's also this theory that he died when he was serving in the military and his twin brother took his place, meaning that the twin was the one who died on the toilet. There are a lot of other theories that we could probably go through in another episode too. The third one in this tier is Dark Side of the Rainbow. Pink Floyd has an album called Dark Side of the Moon, and rainbow kind of refers to the Wizard of Oz. Many have stated that the album lines up with the movie. However, the band has denied that they tried to line the album up with the movie. It doesn't seem like they have completely said no, it doesn't line up at all, just that they didn't do it on purpose, basically. Next is Robert Johnson's Crossroads deal. Now, there's a legend or meme or whatever you want to call it that many musicians and just celebrities in general have sold their souls for success. However, Johnson's legend is one of the more specific ones that I've heard. It basically says that he met with the devil at a crossroad, and that is where he traded his soul for musical success. Next is Paul is Dead. Now, there are a lot of these, but Paul is Dead is probably the most well-known one that I've personally found. But according to this theory, Paul died in 1966 and was replaced with a lookalike. The rumor began actually, that same year, and gained popularity in September of 1969. People were saying that Paul died in a car crash. To spare everyone from the grief, the surviving Beatles assisted in replacing McCartney. They supposedly sprinkled clues in their songs to let people know that this is what happened. But I think ultimately they all have denied it. But that theory still remains today, as a lot of people think that the Paul McCartney we know today is still that body double. The next one is Marilyn Manson's rib removal. Now, this rumor was popular when I was in middle school and high school, so the mid 2000s all the way through like the early 2010s. But it basically states that he removed some ribs to be able to suck himself off. However, this one is easily disproven thanks to Manson himself and the lack of medical literature and evidence to support the claim. It doesn't seem like there have been any evidence that like rib removal for the sake of sucking yourself off has ever been done, like at all. Like rib removal has happened, but doesn't seem like it adds to any flexibility kind of thing. And this rumor was spread a lot in the 90s and 2000s. The next one is the most mysterious song on the internet. As I said, as of recording this episode, this chart is 4 years old. So when it was created by the OP, it still technically wasn't solved. Like people didn't necessarily discover what this mysterious song was. So on March 18th, 2007, this mysterious song was uploaded to the internet, which began this 17-year-long search for the origins of it. And on November 4th, 2024, so almost a year ago at this point, a Reddit user by the name of Marigin1412 found the source. It was a cassette recording of a 1985 radio broadcast of Subway of Your Mind by a new wave group called Fex. The next one is very similar to the Paul is dead one, and it states that Avril Lavigne is dead. Like I said, this one is very similar to Paul McCartney's rumor. It said that Avril had died and was replaced with a lookalike. In 2011, the rumor began with people saying that she committed suicide in 2003 after the release of her debut album, Let Go. She was then replaced by this body double named Melissa Vandella. The alleged proof they have is a supposed subliminal message in Avril's second album, Under My Skin, and her transformation between 2003 and present day. She also did this photo shoot where there's at least one picture with her holding out her hand with the name Melissa on it, but I don't know. I didn't do that much research into it, but I don't know if that was just like edited in or if it was just a single picture or what. But like that's people's alleged proof that Avril is no longer with us. The next one is the 27 Club. There are many musicians and other well-known people who have passed away at the age of 27. Examples include Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison, and Amy Winehouse. Now, there are many theories as to why this quote-unquote club exists, including deals with the devil that ran out when these individuals turned 27. However, I ended up looking into this for a different episode, and people don't, whether they're well-known or not, they're not at a higher risk of dying at 27 than everyone else. It seems like there is a spike of deaths, at least within celebrities, as they get older. So like between 65 and 72, which is really close to at least the US lifespan average. So it's really not, I think it's just because they kind of died at the age of 27 at the height of their careers, and that's why they stand out so much. And the last one for tier 1 is rumors revolving around Gene Simmons' tongue. There are rumors that state that Kiss's Gene Simmons had surgery to make his tongue like that. However, he has denied those claims and states that it's just the one that he was born with. Okay, so tier 2, these are the ones that are still pretty well known. And we're starting off with Keith Richards' father's ashes. The story goes that Rolling Stone Keith Richards mixed some of his father's ashes with cocaine and snorted it. It's one of those like legend rumor things, because Richard was initially the one who said that he did this before switching up and claiming that he never did it. And then he eventually wrote about it in his memoir and said he did it. So it very much walks on the edge of like, it could have happened, it potentially did not happen. But just given, what we know about like what's out there about Keith Richards, like struggles with drugs, it's like not out of the realm of possibility that he did this. The next one is the first chord of Hard Day's Night. For a long while, this was a mystery as no one was able to figure out what the first chord of the song actually was. And from what I could find, it seems like the iconic chord goes as such. George Harrison was playing A2, A3, D3, D4, G3, G4, and C4 on his 12-string guitar. The producer George Martin was playing D3, F3, D5, G5, and E6 on the piano. Paul McCartney played D3 on bass, and John played a loud C5 on a string guitar. Now, that's just what I could personally find, and if someone is like more musically inclined and is able to, like read music and all of that, if they know any different, please, by all means, correct me. I really don't mind. Kurt Cobain death conspiracies is the next one. Now, there are so many conspiracies surrounding his death that I really could do an entire episode just on these conspiracies. But it seems like many of them agree that Kurt was murdered rather than him taking his own life. Or if he wasn't murdered, he just didn't take his own life. That seems to be the agreement that it wasn't suicide. However, despite the suicide note and gun found on his body, which kind of does point to suicide, his body was lying in the greenhouse above the garage for 3 days prior to being found, which kind of brings up the question of like, how was he lying there for 3 days without being found? And that's exactly why people believe that there's more to his death than what was reported. However, the Nirvana bassist Chris Novoselic and drummer and now Foo Fighters frontman Dave Grohl recalled that Kurt wasn't necessarily well in the days and even year leading up to his death. And like, I'm kind of more inclined to believe the people who were closer to him, and I personally believe that it was suicide. Possible that there's like more to the story, but I highly doubt that it's more to the story in the sense of who took his life. Next is the Jim Morrison death conspiracies. Officially, Doors frontman Jim Morrison was staying with his girlfriend in Paris and died in the bathtub on July 3rd, 1971. According to the official records, his body was labeled as heart failure. However, according to some eyewitnesses, they claim that his death was probably more likely due to an accidental heroin overdose, and some claim that he may have committed suicide, while others claim that it's because of the 27 Club curse. But I'm kind of, personally, I think the most likely explanation is the official cause of death, heart failure, or even an accidental overdose of some kind. Next is Cigarettes and Valentines. This is an unreleased album by Green Day. It was meant to be a follow-up to the 2000 album Warning. They were almost finished with it, but the master tapes were stolen from the studio. Rather than re-recording, they started to just start all over, which led to the creation of American Idiot. As far as I could personally find, it's not known who stole the masters, and there were only 7 out of the original 16 songs that have been confirmed, including the title track Cigarettes and Valentines and Walk Away from the album Trey. There's also a few that were also included, I think, in the American Idiot Broadway musical, but I forgot to write them down in my notes. Next is Ready and Steady. This is a record recorded by an artist that only went by DA and had charted on one of Billboard's charts at 102 at its peak in 1979. For a while, no one knew exactly who released Ready and Steady. Due to the initials, many thought it was released by this female-led band Da. However, the group has denied that they recorded anything like this, which led to many believing that it was some kind of fluke. The recording was actually found and it was revealed to be recorded by amateur musician Desmond Armand D.A. Lucchesi and another guy named Jim Franks. The next one asks, who is You're So Vain about? Who it's about as a whole still seems a mystery. However, the singer Carly Simon has confirmed that actor William Beatty is the subject of the second verse. While unconfirmed, as Carly has yet to say anything beyond Beatty, some say it could also be about Mick Jagger, James Taylor, and David Geffen. Now, there are other possibilities, but these seem to be again, beyond William Beatty, these seem to be the top 3 contenders. The last one in tier 2 is Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. This is the 7th studio album from the Wu-Tang Clan. It was recorded over the period of 6 years between 2007 and 2013. There was only one copy made and sold for $2 million in 2015, and it looks like it won't be released for a long while. The only year I found being in 2103. There was a stipulation for the person who bought it, that it seemed like the stipulation for the original buyer that it could not be released until 2103, but he did have permission to play it at parties. Tier 3, now we're starting to get into the lesser known stuff where there's a chance that you might have heard these in passing, but you probably know even less about these than the ones in tier 2. And the first one is the Love Roller Coaster Scream. Now, there's a scream that you hear in the background of the Ohio Players song Love Roller Coaster. Now, this legend states that it is a scream of a woman being murdered. And it's really not that. In actual fact, it's the scream of the keyboard player Billy Beck. It was meant to imitate the scream of being on a roller coaster. Next is Marilyn Manson's Groupie film. This is a film that is considered lost media as it was ultimately shelved. The manager, Tony Ciula, deemed it so disturbing that it could potentially end Manson's career and potentially lead to a conviction. It was filmed on a camcorder one night during an actual party that Manson was hosting. However, there were only 3 people that have been confirmed to see it, at least all the way through. Manson himself, Tony, and Andy Dick. We already know that Tony found it too disturbing, but Dick said that the partygoers in the movie, I guess you could call it, seemed like they were having fun, yet didn't deny that it was disturbing. Next is Radiohead's Just music video. The video nor the song themselves are necessarily that of legend. It had more to do with what happens in the video. A man is lying in the street, which catches the attention of passersby, with Radiohead watching from an apartment above. People are asking him why he's in the middle of the street, but he refuses to answer. Eventually, he does give an answer. Unfortunately, his line isn't subtitled or even dubbed, so the mystery is of what he said. According to an r/Radiohead thread, the 2 guesses I think that are the most likely are the man saying Radiohead twice or I've seen a way. Next is NWA FBI investigation. In 1989, the Compton rap group NWA received a letter from the FBI claiming that a song from the album Straight Outta Compton promoted violence and disrespect towards law enforcement. While not specifically named in the letter, it was later confirmed that it was referencing Fuck the Police. Next is Beethoven's Immortal Beloved. Now, this is a letter that the composer had wrote in pencil on 10 small pages to an unknown recipient. It's even unknown the exact year it was written, though it seems like they to have been narrowed down to sometime between 1799 and 1810, or at least somewhere around those years. There's also multiple possibilities to who the intended addressee is supposed to be, but the 2 favorites seem to be Anthony Brentano and Josephine Brunswick. Next is the John Lennon FBI investigation. So the FBI surveilled the Beatle in the 1970s due to his political beliefs, especially his anti-Vietnam War stance. This was considered a threat to the Nixon presidency. Their ultimate goal was to deport him, even using past drug use to try and obtain this goal. Ultimately, they failed this mission and granted him permanent residence in the U.S. in 1976. Next, the next one is kind of like, if you are part of the true crime community like I am, you probably have heard of this one, but that is the Beach Boys Charles Manson connection. Charles was actually kind of musically inclined and at one point did want to record an album. At some point, he ended up befriending Dennis Wilson in hopes to further his musical goals. Manson wrote a song called Cease to Exist, which ended up being altered by the Beach Boys to their song Never Learn Not to Love. This made Charles mad, as you can possibly imagine, as he did not receive any credit. The next legend rumor thing does state that the CIA wrote Wind of Change. This rumor about the Scorpion song stemmed from a podcast in 2020. It was written during the Cold War, during the events of the Cold War, so it seemed like a great opportunity for the CIA to create something to help their cause. However, there was no such evidence to back this claim up, and the band themselves say they wrote it with no outside help, especially not from the CIA. And finally, for Tier 3, it's the Bob Marley assassination attempt. Bob Marley, his wife Rita, and the manager Don Taylor were shot, but thankfully not killed, on December 3rd, 1976, just 2 days before Marley and his group were set to perform. They still did show up before Marley took time to recoup. The gunmen were never caught, but many believe this attempt had been perpetuated by political figures or even the CIA. Alright, Tier 4. Now we're starting to get into the lesser known stuff. It's possible that you've heard these, but if you're not deep into the mystery side of things, even with music, it's possible that you've never heard of these. Or at least if you have, you know even less information than previous tiers. So the first one is the death of Sam Cooke. Sam was shot in a motel on December 11th, 1964 by the motel manager, Bertha Franklin. According to her account, Franklin shot Cooke in self-defense, and her recollection of the events was accepted. This led the police to closing the case, saying that it was a justified homicide. However, many people have questioned the validity of events that took place on the night of his death. Those close to Sam believe that there should have been a deeper investigation, and if it were someone like Frank Sinatra or one of the Beatles, the FBI would be called in. And if I didn't write it down in my notes, I'm kind of upset that I didn't, but I remember reading something along the lines of someone who attended Sam Cooke's funeral said that looking at his body, something just did not add up. Next is Randy Fitzsimmons' true identity. This one is technically still a mystery. Randy is labeled as the Hive's songwriter, but his identity was never truly revealed. That being said, the NME has come out to say that the name Randy Fitzsimmons is a registered pseudonym belonging to the lead guitarist of the Hive's, Nicholas Arson. Many believe that this Randy character is a myth, but Arson and the rest of the band deny these claims and still stand by the fact that Randy is the band's songwriter. Next one is very similar to the Avril and Paul legends, and that is Andrew WK is a character. So basically, it's just Andrew WK is not who we think he is. Many people believe that this musician is played by multiple people. The evidence that's given is mostly that his appearance has changed a lot over the years. Now, it's one of those things where when I first started looking to this specific theory a few years ago, it's yeah, technically Andrew WK is a character. Anyone who is in front of a screen or in the public eye, they are going to be playing a character of some sort. So this one was always kind of just okay, this one's just like kind of like a BS, like fun thing to talk about kind of thing. Next is the Louie Louie FBI investigation. The FBI was called in to investigate the lyrics to the Kingsman song due to potential obscene lyrics. Indiana Governor Matthew E. Welsh even commented how it must be pornographic because his ears would tingle every single time he listened to it. However, after a 2-year investigation, the FBI concluded that the song was unintelligible at any speed and therefore broke no obscenity laws. Next is the death of Bobby Fuller. Just months after his hit I Fought the Law came out, Bobby was found dead in an automobile parked outside of his apartment. Initially, his death was officially labeled as suicide, while his family believed that it was murder. After Bobby's death was featured on the show Unexplained Mysteries, his death was officially changed to accident, but some people still think that his death is technically unsolved or even unexplained because how he was found was kind of, just to put it plainly, was kind of weird. Next is the Lou Reed crying children incident. So there's a track on the Lou Reed album Berlin called The Kids. So Berlin, the album, tells the tale of a couple going down the road of drug addiction and the kids get taken away. During the song The Kids, you can hear children screaming and calling out for their mom. The producer, Bob Ezrin, used his own kids for the effect. The legend states that he told his kids that their mother died and that's why the children crying sounds so haunting and disturbing. However, in reality, it seems like Bob told his oldest son to sound upset, though it didn't sound sad or upset enough, so he had the youngest join in as well. And finally, for tier 4 is the death of Elliott Smith. This is another somewhat mysterious, unexplained death. On October 21st, 2003, Elliott and his girlfriend Jennifer had gotten into an argument. Jennifer ended up locking herself in the bathroom to take a shower. She ended up hearing him scream, and upon opening the bathroom door, she saw her boyfriend standing there with a knife in his chest. There were ultimately 2 stab wounds, the one that Jennifer found when she opened the door, and another one that seemed to have been made probably just seconds before that. Jennifer took the knife out, and after Elliott collapsed, she ended up calling 911. He ultimately died from the 2 stab wounds, and his death was ruled a suicide as there was a suicide note, or at least a post-it with something that resembled a suicide note that read, "I'm so sorry. Love, Elliott. God forgive me." Although the autopsy report that was released that December of the same year had left the possibility of homicide, but because Jennifer claims that she was in the bathroom when this happened, it's like there's really no eyewitnesses who saw this happening. Alright, so tier 5. Now we're really getting to the more obscure stuff. So the first one for tier 5 is the 9 Inch Nails fake murder investigation. The band had created a music video for their song Down In It in 1989, which included scenes of Trevor Reznor appearing to be mutilated. This led to investigators believing that the video was actually a snuff film and launched this investigation against the band. However, it turned out to be a hoax and Trevor was actually alive. It basically came out to a humorous misunderstanding and it was just a bit for the music video. Next is the disappearance of Richie Edwards. You can argue that Richie is part of the 27 Club as he went missing in 1995 at 27 and is yet to be found and has been presumed dead since 2008. Richie was the guitarist for the Manic Street Preachers and went missing on February 1st, 1995. His car was found near the Severn Bridge 2 weeks later. This bridge is a known suicide spot, and as such, this was the prevailing theory that he committed suicide. However, with a lack of body and note, others think there was other forces at play. One popular theory seems that he decided to quote unquote die to start his life over so he could escape the public eye, much like with the Elvis theory. Other people think that it could have also been alien abduction, which with a lot of unexplained disappearances seems to be like a common theory. Next is the Graham Parsons body theft. So musician Graham Parsons died on September 19th, 1973 at the Joshua Tree Inn near Joshua Tree National Park, California. As far as I could tell, this is according to his manager Phil Kaufman, that he told Phil that if he were to die, that he wanted to be cremated and have his ashes spread in the park. It seems like Phil took this as like, I don't know if you want to call it a bet or a deal, whatever you want to call it. Like Phil kind of took this to heart and like, accepted this as like Graham's like dying wish, guess you could say. So before Graham's body could be moved back to New Orleans for a quote unquote proper funeral or burial, Phil, with the help of an assistant, stole the body and set it on fire to carry out the final wish. Now, there was an investigation, and the remains of Graham Parsons' body was gathered and given back to his family so they can do like what they deemed a proper funeral from what was left. But because there were no laws against body theft at the time, so Phil and this unnamed assistant were only given a $750 fine. Finally, for tier 5, it's the mystery of the Peanut Duck singer. This is one of those sort of unsolved mysteries. The voice is clearly that of a young girl or woman. A little known singer by the name of Marcia Gee is credited to singing the Peanut Duck song, but depending on the source, it was either Marcia herself or another person involved that stated that the song was recorded in some studio while she was drunk. However, it has been questioned whether or not she really was the singer, so that's kind of why I say it's like kind of solved but unsolved at the same time. All right, tier 6. We're starting off with the disappearance of Connie Converse. Connie was a musician who disappeared, obviously, and in the months leading up to her disappearance, she seemed depressed and burnt out. Those close to her did try to cheer her up and even pooled their money to give her a 6-month trip to Europe in hopes to improve her mood. Then, in the days after her 50th birthday, Connie packed up her stuff and kind of just drove off. As far as I could find, or at least make sense of, there seemed to be only one confirmed sighting of Connie after her disappearance. The family hired a PI to try to find her about 10 years after she left. However, the PI did warn the family that he can look for her, but he couldn't make her come back. And that was when the family said like, okay, we respect her decision to disappear, and just kind of stopped looking for her. Next is the death of Peter Ivers. On March 3rd, 1983, Peter was found bludgeoned to death in his LA loft apartment. The only solid evidence was a hammer, and thanks to that lack of evidence, very few witnesses, in a botched initial investigation, the case is technically still cold, though many suspect that director and producer Dave Jove is the one who murdered Peter. However, many close to Jove have maintained his innocence and said that he could not have done something like this. Next is the disappearance of Jim Sullivan. Prior to his disappearance, Jim had left LA on March 4th, 1974 to go to Nashville in his VW Beetle. The next day, he was pulled over under the suspicion of driving under the influence. After passing the sobriety check, he checked into a hotel in New Mexico, after which he was seen purchasing alcohol and ended up leaving town. The day after that, he was seen 26 miles south of Santa Rosa. Later on, Jim's car was found with all of his money and papers, some clothes, his guitar, and a box of unsold records. Despite the search, he was never seen again. There was a decomposing body that resembled the singer-songwriter, but it was later determined that it wasn't him. Many have thought that his disappearance was due to suicide, foul play involving police or mafia, and even alien abduction. And the last one for tier 6 is Jandek's identity. While it has been confirmed that Jandek is a man named Sterling Smith, there's still not much known about him. What we do know is that since 1978, he has released over 120 lo-fi albums, and he is often described as the most enigmatic figure in American history. And I could also find that he was born in, I think, 1948, definitely the 1940s, and that he kind of does a lot of unannounced performances, but seriously, beyond that, there's really not much known about him. And finally, tier 7. So now these are the ones that are really not known, or just not a lot of people talk about these ones. These are the ones I've had the most trouble finding any information on, but I wanted to talk about at least some of the ones that appeared in tier 7. So first, we're going to talk about the theory that Stephen King shot John Lennon. As far as I can find, this was just a rumor started with nothing to back it up. It seemed like if it did get its start online, it seems like it might have started on Reddit or 4chan, but a vast majority of evidence points to the one who was convicted, Mark David Chapman. I couldn't even find anyone saying why Stephen King would even want to shoot John Lennon, so this one was just so out there. Next is Smokey Robinson and Diana Ross are actually Michael Jackson's parents. This is a rumor that actually ended up getting back to Smokey, who has denied it, and as far as I could tell, Smokey, he seems to have nothing but good things to say about both Diana and Michael, and maintains that he is not MJ's dad. The next one is theory that Rivers Cuomo is Kurt Cobain. Like I said, there are so many conspiracies surrounding Kurt's suicide and death, including Kurt faking his own death, and this conspiracy kind of runs with that idea that his death was faked. According to this theory, Nirvana's lead singer faked his suicide so he could start anew under a new name, Rivers Cuomo, with a new band, Weezer. And while Rivers has denied it, he does joke about it. And plus, when you look at pictures, there might be a few similarities between Rivers and Kurt, but it's, to me, and they don't look enough alike for this to even be viable. And finally, the final one, I feel like this has been picking up more popularity in recent years, but it's the theory that Stevie Wonder isn't blind. So this one isn't necessarily completely false, or at the very least, it wasn't based on total complete bullshit. Stevie Wonder wasn't technically born blind, but he did lose his sight shortly after he was born. So he was born premature and developed something called ROP. I cannot pronounce what the full thing stands for, so ROP, but this disease basically caused his retinas to detach, which in turn caused total blindness when he was just 6 weeks old. So basically, for all intents and purposes, he has been blind for his entire life. So therefore, this one is, like I said, it's not necessarily based on total bullshit. It's it is technically bullshit, as there is something did happen that caused him to be pretty much blind his entire life.